to improve the outcome of the 2020 census. As a foundation who is really interested in ensuring that all children have access to opportunity, our interest is really on the undercount of children and making sure that all children in the United States are counted. We really understand the ramifications if our children are missed. There are ramifications for resource distribution, for planning, representation, and it really impacts our ability to effectively identify needs and as well as the impact that we are having in our investments. So to this end, in order to elevate the issue, we are releasing our Kids Count Data Book, which will focus on the undercount of children on June 27th. And we've been doing a series of webinars in order to prepare the Kids Count Network in this effort. So our hope is that with this webinar, advocates will leave with ideas on how they can start engaging in the census efforts in their state and have partners at the level that they can reach out to get support and ideas. So with that, I want to really quickly jump in and get started because we have a lot of great information for you all. With us today, we have Stacey Lee from California. We also have Ashen McKenzie from Ohio. We have Kate Bond from New York and Jesse Donaldson from Rhode Island. And finally, we have Whitney Tucker from North Carolina. They'll be discussing how they've engaged different constituents, stakeholders, how they built relationships, and they're really working towards increasing knowledge and support for the census in their state. Now, before I turn it over to Stacey, we'd like everyone to please take a few minutes and fill out this poll. Which of these categories best describes your organization? So I don't know if people are filling it out or not. Polani, do I just go skip to results?
The results are still coming in, Flo, so I'm going to give folks a few more seconds.
Okay.
So you should now be able to see the results on your screen.
My life probably not going to be contingent on whether this sound or not.
It will, yeah. You make it just much of a picture.
If you could please mute your line, we can hear your conversations. So it looks like the majority of the people on the line are state advocacy organizations, and we also have some funders on the line as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Stacey to get us started.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Flo, and thanks everyone for joining. My name is Stacey Lee, and I'm the Managing Director for Early Childhood at Children Now. We're a statewide advocacy organization focused on children's issues. We work on children's issues from 0 to age 26, and we work on health, education, and child welfare. We, as an advocacy organization, use data and research. We are the Kids Count designated organization in California, and we just know how incredibly important it is to ensure that there's an accurate count across the country and in California, in particular, given the large population that we have and the extraordinarily diverse population that we have. So we are very passionate and excited about all of the work happening in our state, and I'll share just a little bit about what we've been doing here in California. Just to provide some context, we have an estimated 14.7 million Californians who qualify as a hard-to-count, as part of the hard-to-count population. And as a children's advocacy organization, we like to remind all of our partners and those engaged in census work that children are part of almost every single hard-to-count community. So it's really important not to think of the hard-to-count communities in silos or separately, and while every community needs different approaches that will be effective for them, it's really important for folks to think about what does that mean for the families with children, and in particular young children, given that they are the hardest to count age group within their outreach and engagement efforts. In addition, in California, our young child population is more diverse and also more poor than older age groups. So this increases the challenges we face in terms of ensuring families with young children are engaged and outreach to effectively. And then we've also been working pretty closely in LA County because as a county, it has more people than 42 other states. It's very large and populated. And it is also considered the hardest to count county in the country because of its diversity and because of the size. So once we knew things were starting to roll and there was some controversy already spurring around the census, advocacy organizations got organized pretty quickly in California. We created the Census Policy Advocacy Network, which is a statewide coalition. We have 15 steering committee partners, and they're both statewide and some organizations are national, that reflect the hard-to-count populations. So there's some organizations who focus on ethnic or racial communities. We have advocates focusing on Native American populations, housing advocates, LGBTQ rights organizations, immigrant rights organizations, and children's advocates. The coalition immediately sprung into action and has two main approaches that we're focused on. At the state level, we are coordinating with state government and with philanthropy coalition partners to assess and figure out what we could be doing in California to make sure that the state is well prepared. The coalition was involved in doing a lot of outreach focused on Luca in the last year when it was focused on enrolling and making sure counties and municipalities were signing up. And we're very happy to say that all of the counties that we outreach to, including LA County, were all enrolled, and every city in LA County, which is over 88, I think, were also enrolled as well as most of the counties within the state. And the state also recently, the governor created a complete count committee, and we have members of our coalition appointed as part of that committee, and we're coordinating very closely with them. And then we've just really been focused on the budget. We got an initial just over $1 million last year in the budget to start and enable the planning efforts to happen at the state level, have been advocating persistently since that time. The governor included about $40 million in his January budget, and which we felt very good about. We felt like that was a good beginning, but as we began talking to our partners and doing some assessments around what it would really take to do a thorough job in California, given some of the emerging clarity around what the limitations might be in terms of how the census administration was being organized and some of the limitations that were happening there, our coalition began to ask to increase that amount, and we requested $107 million, particularly focused on funding for community-based organizations so that they can be engaged at the ground level with communities that they're familiar with, that are trusted partners that communities recognize, which is a lot higher than the governor's initial $12 million, which was part of his budget for CBO outreach. So that is all. We are at the peak of budget negotiations this week. The conference committees are meeting and negotiating with the administration, so we should know by June 15th what the outcome is. And then locally, as I said, we've had some concerted efforts in LA County in particular because of its importance in terms of capturing such a large part of California's population. And really there's been fantastic leadership by both the city of LA and the county of LA to make sure that there's no duplication, that their efforts are coordinated. And so we've been part of regional planning efforts and figuring out how we can best support them. And So in addition to the Luca outreach that initially happened, the county and the cities are really going into heavy Luca address verification mode. And so we're working to ensure community organizations that have the ability and capacity to support that effort are getting involved. There's been some trainings happening in LA, and we just want to make sure folks are engaged and are aware that this is happening right now and not in a year from now. So in addition, in terms of our organization's particular involvement, in addition to what the coalition is doing, is we're leveraging our children's movement. The Children's Movement of California is a platform that we created over the last decade to harness the thousands of organizations in the state who support policy that's better for kids. So it's a really diverse range of organizations. The slide says we have over 2,550 organizations signed up right now, and I learned yesterday it's over 2,570, so it's always increasing, which is fantastic. And there is such a diverse group of organizations. There's chambers of commerce, there's religious and faith-based organizations, community organizations, service organizations that are the ones on the ground meeting and serving and supporting families and communities every single day. They understand the importance of the issues that we work on, and given their diversity, this is a really good platform to reach a broad group of stakeholders about the census as well. So we've been sharing out updates to members of our the children's movement. So statewide, the organizations are receiving updates about what's happening with the budget or opportunities to get involved or stay informed. And then we're also doing particular outreach to members in LA County, which is over 400 organizations, so they know about what's happening in their county and opportunities for them to get engaged. Just in terms of how our children's movement works, it's pretty simple. Organizations can join, and through our website, they receive regular policy updates about a wide range of issues that the organization works on, and then they opt into our campaign. So if there is an advocacy push, they will never be signed on to something that they don't agree with. So out of the over 2,000 organizations who are members, we'll have several hundred join on for a campaign on child welfare or on early education or different issues that we focus on. And it's a great way for people to stay engaged and informed. In terms of the resources and assets that we have available to us, we really thought that this was a great way to get the information out to a broader range of organizations in California, and we're continuing to look to identify other opportunities to be supportive of the various ways that we can on the census. So that's it from me. I'm going to turn it over to our friends in Ohio.
All right, great. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. So my name is Sean McKenzie. I am the Policy Director for the Children's Defense Fund Ohio. We are a research, data, policy, and advocacy organization. We also, just as a quick heads up, we also do have some direct service components to our work as well. And so on our work last year with the census, the role that we took on was really around communications, strategic communications, messaging. And so our approach really centered on three things: infographics, a press release to elevate the issue, and then relationship building. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of what that looked like for us. Our reasoning, so the big thing that we really used was, and the focal point was really the infographics we created for our 2020 census campaign last year. And the reason why we used infographics, the big thing was to raise interest. A lot of our conversations that we sat down with tons of people along the pathway, and the consistent feedback, we haven't really thought about the census. Tell us more. It hasn't been on our radar. And, we're not really sure if we want it to be yet. And so we were like, what's our approach to try to make sure that this is interesting, easy for people to start engaging on. Let's make it fun, and then, let's create a pathway toward people getting more of the content that they need. So we used a couple of different products to get us there. So So the one that you're looking at right now was our first of 4 infographics. This one, the Census Matters for Ohio's Communities. This is hats off a little bit, slight homage of the awesome work from our friends in New York. This was really designed to sort of put the census on people's radar. Why is it important? Why should we care about the census? Most people weren't thinking about the census's association with funding, and the inclusion of the participation rate at the bottom, so that there's kind of something for everyone. So you could think about whether we're talking about with public policymakers, they can be thinking about what this means for their districts. We can be thinking about, and we can share with folks, especially those really dark blue sections. A lot of those are some of our highest need areas, especially in Appalachian, Ohio. And so it just made the conversation easy. It made this easy to sort of start raising and elevating the issue. The next one you'll see here is our Will Your Children Count? This was our opportunity to try and place the really child-specific aspect of this issue on the table, and to lay out. We were able to use the data that was explaining about how many children in Ohio were at risk of being undercounted. Ohio is number 10 on the list for the largest number of children to be at risk of undercount based on where they're located in the state geographically, just being in a hard-to-count area. But also we were able to get the breakdowns for the percentage of children for the 50 largest metropolitan areas. So we found quite a few people who found that breakdown to be persuasive and relevant in thinking about and deciding, maybe the census is an issue I should care about. Next was our local updates count. And so this was our opportunity and our approach to try to elevate the Luca program with our local governments. Ohio's Luca participation in the 2010 census was about 35%. 35% of local governments joined in. And so our goal was to raise that, and in part, and I'll explain just a little bit more in a few moments, but we spent some time really working with a number of different partners to get that messaging out there, to elevate that issue. And then this infographic, the Census Helps Feed Our Children, this was our attempt to try to make it really practical. We found from our conversations with a number of different stakeholders, whether we were talking with the State Chamber of Commerce or we were talking with advocates or local providers, even if we described how the census influenced some of the large programs, the big, huge numbers, and the $21 billion for the 16 largest programs, it didn't always, for them, it wasn't always practical. Well, what does this really mean? How does this affect, people and children in my area? And this was our attempt to sort of really start to make it really practical, to get in, look at the SNAP data, the WIC data, and then, some of these programs at the bottom that people are really familiar with in terms of, school and lunch and things of that nature. And for many, we got feedback that this sort of helped make it a little bit more tangible. That was one of the things that we worked really hard with, which was we kept finding pretty consistently that the census just wasn't on people's radar. They hadn't been thinking about it. They didn't have plans toward it. And because, it's been 10 years since the last one, if there was a person in their organization who had worked on it, either the person was long gone or their memory was really old. And so, to help make it practical and tangible for people, get people excited about wanting to work on the issue, that was really the heart of what we tried to do. Our distribution. So we did two things. We worked with, or really three things. So we worked with local government groups. Specifically, we worked directly with the Ohio Municipal League, the Ohio Association of County Commissioners, and then the Ohio Township Association. And we worked with them to basically understand, hey, what communication, what information is probably going to be most relevant to sort of pique the interest of our friends in our local government positions, and then also to work with them to distribute the information. And so all three of them we sent our infographics to, along with our press releases, or our press release. The Ohio Municipal League and the Association of County Commissioners both decided to publish articles, which both included the links to our infographics and, in one case, the image, as well as provided information about the Luca program. One of those entities wrote their own article. For the other entity, we wrote the article for them, and they published it. We also did a press release as we released our infographics, and one of the neat things was we got some great news coverage from the Dayton Daily News. One thing that we got from their reporter was that she'd been pushing for a couple of months for them to do a story on the census, and her editor just refused. He just didn't think that there was enough there for them to dedicate an entire article to it. And so she commented to us specifically that our press release and our infographic were somewhat of a godsend because for her editor that was enough to get them over the hump. And so they ended up producing a really robust article explaining with great detail all the stuff that was going on at the federal level with the census. They included information from us, and we were quoted in it. And then interestingly, Dayton is the only location in Ohio at this point to have started a local complete count committee. So we'd like to think we played a little part in that. Finally, with social media. And so what we do typically is for any time that we're creating an infographic, especially if it's multi-page, we always request of our designer that they design it in such a way that we can take the slices, the parts of the infographic at any point and publish them independently on social media. It makes it really easy for us to have great content as we release things. Just makes it really simple. It also kind of saves on time and money. Finally, our outcomes. So I think we were able to successfully raise quite a bit of awareness on the census. We had great distribution, a lot of great feedback from local government entities, from advocates and others. We like to think we played a part in the increase of Luca participation in Ohio. So in 2010, about 35% of local governments participated in Luca. For 2020, just under 40% of local governments participated. So practically speaking, the number moved from 361 local governments in 2010 to over 400 in 2020. Finally, we used these materials as well as some really direct relationship building with a few different entities to help stand up an Ohio census table. It had its first meeting in February, and we're geared up now for a second meeting at the end of July. So thanks so much for this opportunity to present with you. And I believe at this juncture, I'll hand it off to our friends in New York.
All right. Thanks, Ashen. I really appreciate that. I am Kate Tootin, and I answered other to the poll because I work in state government in New York State, and we have a direct connection to our local governments and our local government agencies, such as health departments, social services departments, etc. So these were some of our infographics that we used to start raising awareness about the census and its importance to New York, and also, as my colleagues have mentioned, the local update of the census address list, or LUCA. And so we were able to get all of the counties in New York State to participate, which was very exciting and better than we had done in 2010 in New York. So that was great. I want to give a shout out to Flo and Palani for putting this webinar together and for helping us get started. Palani was great with my computer troubles. And my colleague Mary DeMasi is not able to be with us today, but she was integral in all the work that I'm going to tell you about. We have organized regional briefings about the census across New York State. We are partnering with the New York Civic Engagement Table, which has been funded from the National Funders Initiative on the Census, and they are very involved in local, on-the-ground organizing for voter registration and voter information about things that are going to be on the ballot or information in their communities. So that's been wonderful. We've also have the regional census office based in New York City. It covers all of the New England states and New Jersey and New York. So we were very fortunate to partner with them, and so we've had a census employee at each of these briefings to bring their point of view and their plea for people getting involved in partnerships and Luca to these briefings. So that's been wonderful, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from those meetings about how people can get involved. They're interested in the census jobs. They're interested in more of the information about what's going on with the money in New York State. And so we just have garnered a lot of information sharing within communities. And as you might know, from a government point of view, that's always wonderful to bring the community together and to talk about some of the, even if it's challenges, but to talk about some of the things that government does for their community. We've seen a lot of connection within these groups, within these rooms where people are connecting to one another. They're connecting about the census, about the need in their community, and there's also a sense of belonging, which I hope bodes well for our New York count, that people want their communities to be counted. They want their communities to be represented. And so that's been very interesting and gratifying to hear. Mary and I also went out and did some focus groups. So people have been very interested in this because there's definitely a dearth of information coming from the census about what the messages are going to be. There's as you can well imagine, there's mass confusion right now. So we did some focus groups. And in New York, I always like to sort of ground myself in the data. And this is a chart about the children and who they live with, their household head of education status, attainment. And we have, it's not quite evenly split, but we do have 54% of our young children living with parents who have a high school education or less. And so that leaves the remainder that have some college and or a bachelor or graduate degree. So again, this is just to remind me and Mary when we go out that we're not really talking to ourselves. Both Mary and I have graduate degrees and well-versed in the census. So we are trying to garner information from people who may not be well-versed in these issues. And certainly young parents are less likely to have been exposed to the 2010 census or even the 2000 census. So we're definitely starting from the ground up. So we were very interested in finding out their motivation to complete the census form. What would motivate them to complete the census form, and once they heard about it, could they provide us with any information about what might motivate their friends and family. And we were also partnering with Head Start, which is a tremendous, wonderful partner in New York State. And we wanted to know the trusted messengers. And so I have preliminary findings here from our U.S.-born low-income parents. They definitely wanted their communities to be represented and to get their fair share. They were very interested in the census jobs, and there was a unique conversation in one of the groups about the race question, which has been tinkered with a little bit at the census for the 2020 questionnaire. And there were quite a few who were quite adamant about not wanting to answer the race question for various reasons, which was something we just wanted to bring up and highlight for folks. There was also a concern about the government having data about our children, especially infants. And as you know, there's a humongous amount of information if you give birth in a hospital about your infant that may or may not go to the government, but certainly somebody has it. So that was an interesting discussion amongst the parents also. They definitely used local radio, social media to get their information, and they wanted to give us advice about their community, about which radio stations or TV stations or Facebook, Twitter people we should follow to get the word out. And of course, this was all before the Facebook and Cambridge Analytica fiasco, debacle, situation, choose your word. And in addition to the Head Start teachers that were always at the top of the list, physicians and their faith-based leaders were credible sources of information to this group. We also talked with parents of children in the migrant Head Start program in New York. And again, we just have a great relationship with the Head Start program, and it was wonderful to go into this school that's been taken over by the migrant Head Start, and the parents were there, and they were very much there because Head Start staff had asked them to come to our focus group, and it was amazing to see that bond. So they really felt the risk of filling out the census would be easier if they knew that the funds would be used to help their children, to make things better for their children. And that was very consistent with the risks that they had taken to be there, to be working. They were concerned about identification and inquired how the census would know where they were. And again, of course, with migrant workers, there are some complications in finding them or where they are. Sometimes they're in barracks, sometimes they're in houses nearby in the community. So there are definitely different ways of figuring that out. They were interested in the confidentiality restrictions and what would happen if they did not respond. This seemed to be information for their community as well as for themselves. They did express genuine concern about government, which seems rational right now. Media outlets were very limited, and not just because of where we were in rural New York. They were very trusting of the Head Start staff, and doctors were another credible source for this group. So in New York, we've definitely been pivoting from the Luca support. We were able through NEKC Census Grant to put forth some training webinars for our local government and planners throughout New York State. We hired the demographer who had retired recently, the state demographer, to do some trainings with them. And even though Luca had been improved and innovated since he had done it in 2010, he offered quite a bit of resource to the people who were doing Luca now. And their Luca dates are coming up in July and August, so we're excited to wrap up Luca with them. I'm not quite sure how we're going to celebrate it, but it certainly is a tedious job to update the address list, so we want to be able to celebrate with them. We may do more focus groups with parents in New York State, and we are doing more regional census briefings to raise awareness and gather audience reactions. And our state is putting together a state complete commission, and we are seeing interest in complete count committees, so we will be doing a training on that as well. I know on our planning phone call we had talked a little bit about funding and how states could fund this or agencies could fund this, and we are a state, New York, that had a deficit this year in our budget planning. I do envy California with their budget surplus, I must say. So we do not have direct funding to local governments or available to community-based organizations right now. In New York State, that is something we do hope to get into the budget next year. That's something that the Commission will very likely recommend as well. But I do think that there are a large number of foundations that are getting support from national associations and philanthropy in general, so I would encourage everyone to reach out to their community foundations and the larger philanthropy networks in their states. These are some resources both nationally and New York specific. I think that the slides are going out to all of you so you can have these links. You don't have to write them down now. Just wanted to give you a sense that there's a ton of work going on right now about the census in the advocate and the government world. You would not be alone if you started this work, so definitely feel free to reach out to Mary and I. And I get to hand it off to my Rhode Island colleague.
Hi everyone, this is Jessie Donaldson at Rhode Island Kids Count. I hope you can all hear me. I am going to be speaking a little bit today about Rhode Island Kids Count's census efforts. Some of them we're leading on and most of them we're involved in. But just to sort of give you a sense, if you're not familiar with Rhode Island Kids Count, we're a state multi-issue child advocacy organization, and we seek to improve health, safety, education, economic well-being, and development of Rhode Island's children. And just to toss out a few numbers, because we all love those, we have 208,640 children in Rhode Island. That's the 2016 estimate. And of those, about 26% are under the age of 5. 17% of all of the children live in poverty, and 26% of all of those children live in an immigrant family. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of why some of the undercount issues are particularly important to us. A little bit more context is that in the last census, Rhode Island came very close to losing congressional representatives, and so we are always aware of that possibility and are striving to get a complete and accurate count in the hopes that that will not be the case. Or that at least it won't be caused by an undercount. Okay, so to give you a little bit of sense of where I'm headed today, I'm going to start off talking about some efforts we've been connected to related to the 2018 EndtoEnd Test. So since we're all census nerds, we all know that this year there was only one end-to-end test of the census being done, and it is being done in Providence County, Rhode Island. And so we've had some activity here. And also then talking about sort of how that's sort of setting people's eyes toward 2020 already and things that are beginning to happen related to 2020. I will also say that this is probably where I'm headed is not like a comprehensive list of everything that's going on. I know that there are Luca efforts going on in certain jurisdictions, but these are the ones where Kids Count has been involved. So in April, on April 13th, we were part of a Census Solutions convening. So this brought together state and local partners, and I listed them out here, along with some national partners to bring a group of organizations together with the hope of raising awareness about the end-to-end count and Census 2020, and also to get some political buy-in and public support for the complete and accurate count. So threw in a couple of pictures of some of our recognizable faces. So this on the left is Dr. Ledbetter. She's the head of the Urban League of Rhode Island. And to the right is our own Flo Gutierrez from the Kids Count Network. So I thought I'd throw one in since Flo's on the call as well. And then here we have sort of just a group shot, but also the picture on the top is Mayor Jorge Lorza, who's the mayor of Providence. And on the bottom is Nellie Gorbea, who's the Secretary of State of Rhode Island. And both of them really spoke passionately about the importance of counting kids. And this was sort of bubbling a lot around the time of all of this sort of citizenship question sort of controversy, and so both of them also spoke quite a bit about getting out and getting counts for kids in immigrant families, particularly Latino children in Rhode Island. So also because we've been having the end-to-end test, the mayor of Providence has been operating a complete count committee out of his office. His deputy chief of staff actually sort of operates the group. The U.S. Census Bureau usually has staff there, and then there are groups, sort of various different people from state and local organizations who gather every 2 weeks, and we talk about sort of what's happening with the test. Currently, the census gives an update from their point of view of kind of where we are in the process, and then all of the state and local stakeholders have an opportunity to give feedback about sort of what's going well and what could be improved, and they get into the nitty-gritty. So like the last meeting focused a lot on the enumeration phase as it pertains to group quarters. So it's really, really weedy stuff, but I think that they're able to get some feedback. And I think, most of the feedback in those sessions I think because the census I will say, I feel like the census people in the meetings that I've been at have been very, very responsive. I think that because of their budget, there have been a lot of issues around communications. There have not been a lot of communications. A lot of people had no idea what the form was when it first arrived in their box. I don't live in Providence County, but I think that was a pretty common thing, even amongst people who are kind of in the know on things. So even people in our own office were surprised when it started, because there wasn't a whole lot of rollout ahead of time. So we're now trying to figure out what is a plan to get together a state complete count committee. So this has not happened yet. So that right now we're at a phase, we have a kitchen cabinet put together. There are a few organizations, I've listed them there. We're kind of meeting pretty regularly trying to figure out how to get the state focused in on the importance of getting an accurate count, especially looking at undercounted populations, and really trying to inform some of the leaders in our governor's office and our Secretary of State's office and in the legislature in particular about sort of how important this is for Rhode Island and how much we need to focus on it. And so we have been working on a kind of two strategies simultaneously. One is that our partner Common Cause Rhode Island drafted a resolution related to doing a complete count committee. We were hoping to get that sort of squeezed in right at the end of this session, but it looks like the window is closing on that, and it's not going to happen. And so we've also been working with the governor's office about the possibility of doing an executive order to form a complete count committee and sort of starting to begin a process of thinking about how that would be structured in a way that would be representative of all of the geographies across the state and all of the different populations across the state. So we are giving that some thought. And then I think as the year goes on and into the fall, we're hoping to build out that kitchen cabinet into more of a coalition. We're working on sort of raising funds to support that activity and starting to hopefully some configuration of that coalition will also be on what becomes a state complete count committee. So the 2019 plan, which is where it looks like most of the action is going to happen in terms of getting this put through at the state level, if we can, is that we're going to sort of continue to do outreach and educational activity and with leaders across Rhode Island about sort of the importance of having a committee and how it can really affect our ability to get a complete and accurate count. And then we are probably going to be starting some sort of coordinated communications and advocacy around, we're not sure if this will be sort of a legislative ask. It will sort of depend on where we land with the governor's executive order, and sort of move into also hopefully getting it budgeted. So that's sort of one piece that we really feel like the state needs to put some emphasis on this and hopefully fund. This is Rhode Island, we have small population in general, and a small geography, so we're not thinking it needs to be sort of enormous funding, but we would like the state to have some skin in the game in thinking through how to get the complete count. So we are going to be pushing for that as the coalition comes together, and then hopefully a complete count committee comes together. Okay, so that is where I will stop. I'm happy to answer any questions toward the end, and I just wanted to say thank you to the people who organized this webinar and to my fellow presenters, and also to everyone who is so patiently listening in this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. And then with that, I'll hand it off to Whitney in North Carolina.
Thanks, Jessie. So my name is Whitney Tucker. I'm Research Director at NC Child. And I will preface all of this by saying that I came on at NC Child in October of last year. So some of this work was done ahead of me joining the organization, but I've gotten up to speed pretty fast, and we're a pretty small group. So hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions you might have about our process of census work thus far. Just a little bit about NC Child. We essentially speak up for the needs of children and youth in the halls of the state legislature, at the governor's mansion, and anywhere else that policymakers are making important decisions about the future of North Carolina's kids in our state. Our mission is presented here, but essentially all that you need to know is that we are the Kids Count organization for the state of North Carolina, and we advocate on a variety of different issues that affect children and families. So as far as how we got into census work, I think it's important to start with a look at the data, as a lot of my other co-presenters have done. North Carolina is a state with many hard-to-count communities, largely due to the rampant poverty in the state. About 46% of kids live under 200% of poverty, which for a family of four is about $50,000 a year, and 21% of our kids live at 100% of poverty. I put here also that we have an estimated 73,000 kids that are living in what are considered hard-to-count communities and that are at high risk of being undercounted. And then also in the 2000 census, we had a significant undercount. We're listed as the 8th highest undercount estimated of any state from the 2000 census, and that led to inadequate funding for CHIP across North Carolina. So as a result, eligible children were put on a waiting list and went uninsured until additional funding was secured. There you go. So in North Carolina, our youngest generation are increasingly children in immigrant families and children of color, as it is in a lot of states across the country now. The population of children in immigrant families grew from about 13% in 2006 to nearly 20% in 2016. And more than 40% of kids in North Carolina were non-white in 2016. But unfortunately, Black, Native, and Hispanic and Latino kids are much more likely to be living in low-income families and those that rent rather than own their homes in North Carolina, which is really not a surprise when you take a look at the disparities in median family income by race in the state that I've shown you on this slide. So we knew at NC Child that something had to be done to ensure that these kids and their families will be reached in 2020. And as of 2017, there was no concerted statewide effort to get that done. So beginning in spring 2017, and with the support of funding from Casey, thanks Casey, we appreciate you guys, NC Child acted as the primary convener of what we began to refer to as the North Carolina Census Roundtable. And initially, it included our partner groups Blueprint North Carolina and the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, their educational fund. They have a regional representative who is based in North Carolina. And we held most of our meetings in the beginning at the NC Child office, and the person who was serving as the research director then and our community engagement director both just assumed leadership roles by facilitating monthly table meetings, sending meeting reminders, assisting with coalition recruitment, and leading strategy sessions and task implementation. We kept the group pretty open to any organization with statewide reach and a focus on communities that were at risk of undercount or a focus on children. So in the summer of 2017, some additional state-level funding was procured, and that was used to form a new organization that was called NC Counts. And that organization was really meant to take over a lot of the work that the Census Roundtable had currently been engaged in and focus on census work full-time. And so because NC Counts was new, though, the director was only just becoming familiar with the census advocacy orgs in the state. So NC Child was able to procure an additional $10,000 from Blueprint NC to continue serving as the convener as we made sort of a transition over to NC Counts leading most of this work, and then also to kind of mentor that group and serve as a interim coordinating body until they were ready to go on their feet. So as a result of that funding for additional capacity, NC Counts has now been able to take really the leadership role in overall census advocacy coordination this year. And so the major players in North Carolina in terms of census leadership now are NC Child, along with NALEO and NC Counts. This partnership has really led us to a lot of great results that I'll go into on the next slide. So in addition to the activities that you see listed here, NC Child worked with national partners at the Census Project to send out a press release related to census funding, as well as 2 op-eds. One was submitted by Adam Sotok, our community engagement director, and another by Greg Borum, who is the Communities and Schools of Buncombe County in North Carolina director, who really had a pulse on the needs of the community that had traditionally been undercounted. And both of those op-eds are printed, with Borum's piece running in their hometown paper of their representative, and then Sotok's piece that we exhibited as a blog post. It was also a guest blog on North Carolina Policy Watch, their Progressive Pulse page, and in the Durham Herald Sun Daily. And so other like miscellaneous activities that we had around the stuff I'm about to tell you about from the slide. We had an intern craft a blog post about the threat of census undercounts. It's had over 500 views thus far. And then we've also worked with our partners at Blueprint NC to solicit a public news service radio story about the potential census undercount for children, and that ran on stations across the state. NC Child also continues to work with our coalition partners to work on strategies for reaching hard-to-count communities by using available data. I put on the slide there that, in the past, we were really focused on building up the coalition, finding our partners, doing some communications and outreach so that we could see who could be a trusted messenger in a lot of these different communities, and then also coming up with some common messages that we could all share. Now we're moving toward more data and research-focused strategies to really hone in on who it is that we need to be paying the most attention to. We're currently working with NALEO to write and co-release an issue brief on the undercount as it affects young Hispanic and Latino immigrant children. And we're hoping for additional funding to produce a Make Kids Count data fact sheet series and Make Kids Count video that we can use to promote a larger social media campaign later this year and into 2019. As a result of all the efforts that have been going on, our governor is expected to announce his executive order possibly next week, establishing the state's Complete Count Committee. I listed here about sign-on letters. It was one of the first ways that we really garnered a lot of participation from the coalition. We got 39 co-sponsors that represented over 500,000 North Carolinians, and that Western North Carolina group that I mentioned earlier that was led by Greg Borum had a local letter as well, which we really found to be helpful in communities that have really high a really active population of people who are interested and concerned about the census and are already mobilized, that ability to create not only a larger coalition letter, but then a smaller tailored letter just to their community was something that people were really interested in. And that letter ended up being signed by 10 different organizations. We also signed and shared a national letter that was against the inclusion of the citizenship question, and all of our coalition members, we shared it with them as well, and a few of them signed on to that as well. In terms of LUCA coordination, which a lot of the presenters have mentioned, it was one of our early focuses for the Census Roundtable and then eventually for NC Counts. We convened the North Carolina League of Municipalities and the Association of County Commissioners to let them know, what LUCA is, how it works, why it's important, and they really ran with it. We also started a relationship with the governor's census liaison, Bob Coates, and he was able to come to a lot of those presentations with us and talk to these groups and kind of lend credence to the census as an important issue that shouldn't that isn't something that we should really wait on in a lot of these communities. And so as a result of that, with it being championed by different county commissioners and municipality leaders, we ended up with 88 out of the 100 counties and more than 200 municipalities in North Carolina having now signed up to participate in LUCA. And then in terms of outreach about the work that we're doing and getting out to other trusted messengers and to communities that might not actually speak English, we actually just had an ethnic media roundtable earlier this week that we hosted with our national partners at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and Ethnic Media Services, where we essentially set up a panel that had census leaders in the state talking about different aspects of the potential undercount and what different communities could do about that, and then invited media outlets from a variety of different ethnic backgrounds to attend that and to be able to broadcast that story to their communities. We ended up with 12 different outlets that were reporting in English, Spanish, Chinese, and Arabic. And so we are really hopeful that with additional funding, we can push out this social media work through the rest of this year and into next year, and with the support of those ethnic media allies who can get this message out to different communities and make sure that we have enumerators who are really tapped into their communities doing a lot of this work. Now I'm going to stop there because I know that we're almost out of time and that everybody probably has questions. So fire away.
Thank you so much. Lots of great information, and I get excited hearing about all the work that you guys are doing every time I hear about it. So thank you all for all the work that you're doing in your states. We have one question that came in, and the question is, what types of roles or positions do you all think are key to having on your state's complete count committee? So who should be part of those committees?
This is Kate Bone in New York. I would recommend big business, maybe a network for small business, definitely politicians who can activate a huge network of folks to get out the count, people well known in different regions of your state. And I always go for the pop culture celebrity angle. It's not always helpful, perhaps sometimes, but I think if we could lend an air of excitement around the census, I think it needs every little bit of it.
This is Whitney in North Carolina. I'd also just add to that one of the previous presenters had mentioned the importance of Head Start in their community, and I think that groups like Head Start that parents already trust are important to include in this sort of work because they have such a broad reach in a lot of different communities.
This is Jessie in Rhode Island. So we've thought a lot about ensuring that we have populations that might get undercounted, sort of a group that can represent those populations involved, as well as different geographies across the state. But one piece that has come up in the end-to-end test is because of the transition to it being totally online, we've also made a big point of including libraries in our work because we think that a lot of people are going to end up utilizing their libraries if they don't have access to the internet in their house.
Great. Before we end, we have two short minutes. What advice do you all have for those who haven't started doing work in this area but are thinking about it? What would you say should be their first step to getting involved? Jessie or Stacey?
I mean, I think for us, this is Jessie, I think for us it's been about trying to figure out who else is thinking about this and starting to get involved and then trying to get together with those folks and start making plans together. Because I think until we did that and the convening we had was a good point where people became aware that Kids Count was hoping to get involved in this type of work, where there were lots of people starting to do independent action that wasn't coordinated, and we feel like it will be more powerful if it's coordinated.
Great. So we're at time. If folks have any questions for the presenters, their emails are in the PowerPoint. If you have any questions regarding kids count, or if you have any questions about the Foundation's interest on the topic, feel free to reach out to me. Most of you have my contact, but if you don't, it's FGUTIERREZ@aecf.org. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Hopefully you found something useful in the webinar, and that'll help you engage around the census. Thank you.